Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and it's brilliant as always to be here with you. And as usual, I have with me the inimitable Paul Bindig. How's things, Paul?
Oh, great. Thanks, David. I'm excited for this episode.
Thank you. And I actually said inimitable correctly twice now, so I'm a bit proud of that.
Yeah, don't go for a third. Don't go for a third.
Don't go for a third.
Quit while you're ahead.
So we're thrilled to be back with what is another two-part interview, and we've had some amazing guests recently who have such wonderful stories to tell. We're not leaving them on the cutting room floor. We think you deserve to hear them, and the feedback we're getting is that you love hearing them. So this is the first of two parts of an interview with Mr. Jason Miles. As you'll hear, Jason's had an incredible and ongoing career as a player and producer with some of the most iconic names of both the 20th and early 21st century. So in part one of the interview, we talked to Jason about his work with Luther Vandross and Miles Davis, just to name two. And as you'll hear, there is a lot more to his career than just those two artists, but he has some wonderful insights. And we'll see you at the end of part one. Jason, absolute pleasure to have you with us. Can't thank you enough. It's night time there, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Sure.
So, Jason, I hope you don't mind. I want to kick off in the introduction. We've talked about your amazing career in general, but I thought I'd kick off just you've obviously got a book that's an amazing read, and Paul and I both had a good read of it. So I thought we'd talk about some of your most significant working relationships with artists as a musician yourself,
Sure.
And obviously a keyboard player and producer. So we'll kick off with one of the most significant ones for you, and that's your many years working with the amazing Luther Vandross. So tell us how that initial relationship came about and how you managed to maintain such success with him over a significant period of time.
Well, I had been working with Marcus Miller for a few years, and Marcus and I were like a team, and we did some pretty landmark work, starting, I think just very slowly doing his album Jamaica Boys, as you read in the book. And then we went from there and we did the Sanborn album Straight to the Heart. We did some other stuff, and all of a sudden the Miles record happened too. And right after that, people started, he started looking at, man, maybe Jay's the cat that can help us on this, and Luther wanted to cross over into pop. He just had a great record with The Night I Fell in Love, and he could sell a Radio City Music Hall with no problem. It's just 7,000 seats. That's not what he wanted. He wanted like arenas. And the only way you're going to get arenas is by getting to pop stardom, and he wanted pop stardom. And I believe that Marcus thought that I had, what the tools was, along with him and his ideas, for us to go and to get Luther to cross over. And so we got done from the studio, and I remember my wife was in the city that day, and we went to our favorite health food place we used to pick up food from and, bring it back to the studio. And I went into the car, and Marcus said to me, man, I've been talking to Kathy and telling her that I really want to introduce you to Luther, because we're going to do a new album, and I really want you to get on this thing. I think that's going to be really good. So the next thing you know, I got a call, and they're going to Montserrat in the British West Indies to cut an album, and they wanted me to come. And so I went down there, and that's where we did Give Me the Reason. And you look back at it now, and it was a truly extraordinary experience because, it was George Martin, you know what I mean? George Martin studio in Montserrat, the only elite. That's what it is, no matter how you are, or no matter who you are, you're overwhelmed going down there and seeing, man, I'm a part of something deep down here. This is too much. You go in there like, it can't be in there like, jaded. Well, I'm so and so, and yeah, man. Well, I deserve. You go in there, man, and you say, there's a lot expected of me here, man. This is not like just some gig. This is like another side of the whole groove of going down there, being with all these other musicians, and going and being put on the spot in front of everybody. Because Luther never worked with synthesizers like I had and everything, it was a big deal. And so, and Marcus's ass was on the line also, because, he convinced them, that this was the way to do this time if you wanted to cross over. So, I made the album, and there were a couple of moments, as it's in the book, that extras, with the critical moment when I came really to the next spaceman with him. And when he heard, like, the keyboard stuff on Stop to Love, I knew that was something big, because that was a hit. That was like one of those 80s radio synth hits that could happen in the UK or could happen anywhere, man, because it had the elements. And so, from there, I wasn't like Luther and I weren't best friends at that time, but he was very appreciative. He flew me to LA to finish the album, and we did that out there. And then, I hadn't heard from him in a while. And then he started a new album with a singer, Gregory Hines, and he called me to do it. And that was really like, the continuation. And I worked with him for 10 years. I mean, we had some major moments and, but you feel like in something like that, the more that I look back at it now, the more that I see that there's an arc. And that arc doesn't go on forever. It kind of peaks, And I believe that when we made the album Power of Love, that was a peak in the production people that we had with us. I didn't know at that point if the next record, if there was anything more that we could have given or that I could have given that would have made it. So it was just like, something that people were going to get their minds blown listening to. The Power of Love, people were blown away when they heard that album. You know what I mean? But it was like such a intense production, so much different things happening with it, and so much time it took, the meticulous work. But after that, you go and you say, well, how much more do I really have to give? And I don't think the next album, was kind of the signal of like, it's going to be time to go soon, because you can't keep on. I'm not somebody that could just keep on doing the same thing, especially, with like Miles and people like that always expected you to go to the next step. And that's what I was always doing, going to the next step.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you raised a great point there, Jason, about arcs. And obviously, even if you had continued with Luther, sadly, I mean, he passed away in 2005, I think it was. So what impact did that have at the time? That was obviously after you'd, finished your substantive working relationship. But I assume that still had a large impact.
I didn't work with him. I stopped like 2000 was the last one that I actually did after that. But, I mean, Luther was a complex character, man. He was very complex, like a lot of real, but not, when I mean superstars, I don't mean like, superstars that people got to hit. I mean, Luther was a real, with a genuine story and a real vibe behind him, from the projects, to the background singing, to Bowie, to jingles, to his own solo career. I mean, there was a real, like, you want to use the word arc to his career. And so, at that point, he was in a whole other space and everything like that. And you look at, when I always said this, as sad as it is, and it is very sad, that he just never really took care of himself the way that he should have. I went through 4 diets with him. Talk about a trip. I mean, that was just, that was deep and stressful for everybody, but we always hung in there with him, man. And he was very generous, always paid top dollar, but the man did the top work. And I never had a problem with that, because that's why I was there.
Tell us about early on, I believe, in your relationship with Luther. He nearly had you swimming home at one point when a technical issue arose that took you a little while to sort out. Tell us about that.
Well, it was really interesting because, sometimes things happen and you don't think about it when it's going down until later when you sit in discussion and goes, that's why it happened, man. You know what I mean? But when you sit and analyze it, when it's happening in real time, you don't think the same way. And what was happening was that Marcus was we were syncing stuff to the keyboards, where you had to like play a part and put it in the sequencer and then sync it to tape, so it'll all work together and everything. And so you have a code on there. And so all the time we were doing stuff, I was using the code from mine, from my sequencer. And when we were there, and Marcus was kind of programming drum grooves and then putting it down, and then I would put stuff over it and using the code from his Lindrum, and that was having an effect on my sequencer. And so there were times when it wasn't, because we were trying to sync it up and using a click with it and everything, But Luther, who wasn't used to all that, he just said, "What's going on with you guys, man?" I'm going, "Look, I'm trying." He goes, "You better try, man, or else you're gonna be swimming back home." And I'm not joking around. And he wasn't joking around. I put a lot of money down there, man. And they took a shot on me. When I needed that to happen, it happened. And it was the moment.
You mentioned in your in your book that Luther had a bit of a quirk recording that he didn't like air conditioning to be on. Obviously, worried
Right,
about vocal delivery.
right.
Can you tell us what happened when occasionally the studio had to make some pretty big changes to accommodate this?
Well, I mean, that's like, one instance, when, well, the whole thing behind that one was really that, and this is even a bigger statement about stuff, was that week, first of all, that came on really quick, about when we were going to do this, okay? And, he had a new deal and he wanted to get some money from the deal and he had to turn in some work and everything. So he wanted to book a studio. And what happens is that, New York was cooking, lots of recording studios, man, and lots of action. I mean, those were very heady times for many years, It just seemed like it would never end. And how it did, of course, nobody could have ever predicted. But during that time, it was like rocking. And so the thing about it was that, if it was on a Tuesday, they called me that Tuesday to come in on Monday. They couldn't get a studio in New York. The whole town was like totally booked, which is insane. Think about it. There's not one recording studio in New York that Luther could go to go and record, because every one of them, even the B-level ones, were all booked.
Wow.
And it's like, yeah, it's crazy. So the Hit Factory took one of their rooms and kind of like, got it up to speed, because we weren't going to do a live date. We didn't need other instruments. We didn't need this. We can basically work in the control room. And, it was an older building and the air conditioning was going, through the ducts and everything like that. And it would be spreading out through the floor and everything. And so, Luther, when he was going to sing and he had to sing, he didn't want air conditioning on at a certain point of the day. So about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd tell us to shut the air conditioning off. So we brought fans in the room that went and, kind of kept the air moving so my synthesizers didn't overheat, because I had a lot of them. And what happened was that, in order to get the air out, they covered up the ducts in the room, and that went to the room where like Elliot Shiner and Gary Katz were. So it kind of lowered the temperature of their room like about 15 degrees. And they were like freaking out, man. I heard they were screaming in the halls, man, it was like crazy. And then, Marcus shows up, of course, and he's got to throw some fuel on the fire, like he always does, and so, but even a deeper moment than that, that ties into a thing that I haven't written about yet. And I guess I can do it here for the first time. And, because I'm going to have this chapter in my next book, and it's making the album Any Love with Luther. And that was that we were at Right Track Studios in New York, and it was June. And it was really hot that June in New York in 88, really hot and sticky. I mean, it was like, when you walk outside the studio, we're in air conditioning all day, but still you're in, the studio grime and all that shit on your face. And so we were like there, and Luther goes, man, I want to sing tonight, and you guys can get out of here early. So why don't we stop at like 7:30 and shut the air conditioning off now? So we're still working for like 3 hours, with no air conditioning, just the fans blowing. And, he's happy. Everything's there. Whitney's next door to him, everything's like going really good. So I stay in the city during those times, because the drive home was crazy, get done at 1 or 2, drive home, come back in for the next day at noon, So they always put me up at a hotel that I would always stay on the Upper West Side. And what happened was that I said, wow, 7:30, man. Well, it's 8 o'clock now. I'm saying, wow, man, what am I going to do? Well, they had a lot of movie theaters around the studio. And I said, I'll go catch a movie. I could not get on time for one of the movies, And believe it or not, back then people would walk in the middle of movies. They wouldn't even wait till the start. They would walk in the middle of the movie and then let the movie start again. And then they'd leave when that point. I mean, it happened. You saw that all the time. And so what happened was that I went out. I couldn't get into a movie, and it was steaming outside in New York. So I said, man, I'll go back to the hotel. I don't want to go back to the hotel. Blah, blah, blah. I called up Miles. I said, man, Miles got to be in New York now, man. He's not going to leave for another couple of weeks. So so I call him, picks up the phone at his place, what's going on, man? I'm going, Miles, man, I'm in Manhattan. I got to tell you something. I got nothing to do. Luther's singing vocals, man. We're out of there. Couldn't catch a movie. I was wondering, man, if you wanted to hang for me. Yeah, man, come on over, man. So I said, great, So I go over to Miles's house, and I had to walk like about 9 blocks. It was like about 80, almost 90 degrees, high humidity. You know, I'm getting to Miles's house. I am like drenched. I'm freaking terrible. So I go up to the Essex house where Miles was, and I knock on the door. He opens up the door and he looks at me like for a second, and he slams the door right on me. I'm going, well, Miles is, in a mood. What can I tell you, man? We were friends outside together. Okay, I'll go back to the hotel. It's all right. And all of a sudden, the door opens up again. Listen, man, you're going to come into my place looking like that? I said, yeah, pretty bad, huh? But, man, I'm telling you, man, when Luther was doing this, and it's up, okay, here. So he hands me a bathrobe. I go into the bathroom. I take a shower in Miles's apartment. And, sitting there in a bathroom, Miles is in the kitchen popping popcorn. And we're going to watch the fights from North Dakota on cable, which is a big deal back then. And he was always so perceptive, man. Always so perceptive, seeing his surroundings and the surroundings as he analyzed the situation. So we're sitting there watching the fights, and then there's a black fighter and a white fighter. And it's like, this is second-rate, B-level shit from North Dakota. You know what I mean? So Miles was looking at it, and he goes, you see that over there? Yeah. Right behind the boxer, man. There's a black woman sitting over there. I'm going, yeah, look at that, man. And he goes, yeah, that's the fighter's girlfriend. I'm going, how do you know that? Well, what the fuck would a fine-looking babe like that be doing in North Dakota? I said, that's a very good point, man. So we went back, and then the next day I went back, and people said, well, what did you do last night? I'm going, hanging with Miles. Well, that must have been a trip. I go, yeah. I tell everybody the story. Everybody was hysterical, And these are the kind of days, man. From back in the day, and all that stuff that happened like that, as you read in the book, made me want to create that for the future. Because, if as you read in the forward of the book, Marcus said it right to him that I had the front row seat. You know what I mean? I had the front row seat to so much going on. It was ridiculous.
No, you did indeed have a front row seat, Jason. And I mean, you've just mentioned Miles, and we might segue to that for a little while. So obviously, Miles Davis is one of the most, iconic musicians of the 20th century, and you developed a great working relationship with him. How did you do that? How did you get started with that, and how did that? I mean, as you know, Miles was a little bit renowned as being a very iconic and challenging artist sometimes to work with, and you obviously were very successful at that. So just interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I've been working with Marcus, and Marcus had played with Miles for a few years, and obviously Miles knew the talent level, but they were making an album already. Tommy LaPuma had gotten Miles off of Columbia and signed him to Warner Brothers, which was amazing, man. But so many of us, even though we liked the records he was making, and I did, I like some of those albums in the early to mid '80s, but they weren't like groundbreaking thing, It wasn't like oh man, Miles, man, what's Miles up to, man? Like Bitches Brew, and then you heard later Cellar Door Sessions and Star People, and as the albums got on them, they got less adventurous. There were some good moments, Human Nature and Time After Time, and his signature stuff that he was always able to do and still bring in a modern age. But it wasn't like worldwide groundbreaking. It was like Miles made a record. That's a good record, So what happened? But the Tommy LaPuma didn't want that. He wanted something special, and so what they were making was not that. It was just a continuation of what they were doing. You can hear 5 million stories and all these stories and those stories, but I was sitting there when everybody was talking about it and got to hear it. And it wasn't that the music was bad, but that wasn't what Tommy was looking for, man. Tommy was looking for spectacular. If he was going to sign $1 million deal for that, And so what happened was that Tommy went to George Duke and said, look, man, I don't know, I'm like lost on here now. You got anything you could play for us, something like that? You might have something. George played this track, and Miles liked it. So they sent it to Marcus. Then Tommy came up with the idea, man, we should call Marcus, So send it to Marcus, and Marcus called me up and said, look, man, I got to do some demos for Miles. Doing a new album. Told me the whole story. I go, wow, what do you think? I go, hey, let's go, man. So I went over to his house the next day, and started telling me what was his ideas and everything. So we set up a few synthesizers that I had, And actually, he came and said, we got to start this thing off, man. Something big, something big. And I said, okay. Now, I was into sampling really heavy because I was listening to all the British bands. I wasn't a jazz guy, really. I was jazz, don't get me wrong. I love jazz, but I was very hybrid. I loved synth pop. I loved Talking Heads and, the British bands and everything like that, Human League and Falco and, all of these stuff coming out of Europe. I loved all that stuff, man. That was me. I was what I was doing with my synthesizers, and I would listen to everything. So when Trevor Horn did Art of Noise, I was like really taken back by that. And I started thinking, man, the possibilities are amazing, So when I got my sampler, I started sampling everything, So when Marcus said something, I had all these orchestra hits, and I said, check this out. And I went, what? And it was like, there we go, man. You know what I mean? So that's how Tutu starts out. We hear, bang, and it gets your attention immediately. And so what happened was that a couple of days later, he gets back to me and tells me, hey, man, I got the gig. I'm going to produce these 3 tunes for Miles. I was like, wow. So the reality was that they had eaten up so much of the budget already, was that they were really cutting back. And they didn't want to fly me out to do the sessions. And I told Marcus, look, man, we got to get this thing going because it's you and me. So we went over all the sounds and all the parts and everything like that. And I said, I'm going to sit by the phone. You're going to go there. You're going to turn this shit on. And I'm going to tell you remotely how to do it. You know what I mean? And we'll just go like that. And then we'll see how everything goes. But no, man, I got your back, man. Don't worry. And so he went out there, and it came out really good. And we came back and said to me, look, we got to cut 4 more tracks, man. And now I need you in the studio for real because I got nothing going on, So I said, okay. So we went back there and started developing a few more songs and went back in the studio. And there was Miles sitting over there. And, it's a dream. I mean, a huge dream to be able to work with Miles, especially on a capacity of possibly doing something that was groundbreaking. Not just something that was there, but something that truly was really groundbreaking. And when I heard the demos for Tutu, when I heard the masters of Tutu and Portia and everything like that, I said, man, this is something happening here, man, And so we started getting into the other tunes. And for the next 4 weeks, we were in the studio, and I met Miles. And, Marcus had said to me, man, you'll be here either like 4 weeks or 4 minutes. And I said, well, I guess if we're going to get the record done, I need to be here for the 4 weeks. And he goes, yeah, don't piss him off and everything. And I'm going, well, I'm going to go and say hi. So I said hi, and I told him, and he had heard the stuff by then, and he had heard my name, but he didn't really know me and everything like that. And so when I told him, I said, hey, Miles, I want to introduce myself. I'm Jason Miles, and, I do this keyboard and synthesizer programming, and, all my keyboards back there, that's all my stuff. And Marcus and I work together on it. And whatever you need to do, just tell me. And he goes, well, I like your name. And I said, well, thank you. Very nice. And so I said, well, my friend Bob Berg also played with you. Bob and I know each other for 40 years. I was, yeah, okay. And so that was the start of my relationship with Miles, And the whole thing is Miles was very perceptive. He knew how it was. He knew that I wasn't some braggadocio dude going, well, man, we're hanging with Miles. And my wife the same way when he met her. He looked at it and said, this is not some woman that's going to go around telling everybody that she's, this. So he picked up on her immediately, where other people that were in the studio, he picked up that immediately and says, get them the fuck out of here. I mean, it was like, 2 seconds it took him, you know what I mean? But so I'm saying, this cat works fast, you're either in or you're out. So,
and Jason, how many albums did you do with Miles? I've read
3 albums.
3, yeah. What's the 3? Yeah,
I did Tutu, Music from Siesta, which I will cover on the next book, and Amandola. And you know what? That was almost the arc over there. Where could we go with Miles after that one? It could have been someplace else, but it couldn't have been like the next record. You know anybody? Because we kind of went where the first album with Tutu was basically all synthesizers, all keyboards, drum machine, everything. And then, Siesta was a hybrid but it was a soundtrack. And then Amandola was a definite hybrid of mixing live musicians and studio. So where do you go from there? And so Miles, at that point should have really explored hip hop, on a much more hardcore edge than he did. but there's a lot of stories behind that also. So, you know.
And with a mandala, Jason, you've got a great story in the book about you'd sort of gotten into the D50 and one of the presets. Do you want to tell our listeners about that one?
Oh, yes. Well, you know, everybody knows, Eric Persing from Roland came up with this thing that he called digital native dance. And it was pretty astounding for hearing something back then at that point, listening to that and going, wow. And so my whole thing was that, well, that's like a music store demo. You know what I mean? But we want to sell a D50 here. Press this note down and see what happens, And so, as much as Marcus and I really liked it, I changed it up a bit. Okay. But for the demo, we used that. Okay. Just to kind of get him into it, just kind of moving quickly and not worrying about, let's get this, 4 hours trying to come up with something that's going to last, 10 seconds, So we just put that, when we went in the studio and we put it down, and it was really cool. Miles goes, what happened to the other one? I'm going, Marcus goes, well, the other one is good. We got that. But, a lot of people are using that, man. And we wanted to give you something fresh. Miles goes, I don't give a shit. I want that one. So that's what we used. We used that one on there,
Yeah.
However he viewed it and wanted it, was it. But it made sense because we were able to go and dress it up a little bit also.
Yeah, it's very subtle in the mix at the start of the song. I love it. It's one of the best uses of it, I'd argue. And Jason, so probably just not maybe the last question about Miles, but what did you learn from him? I imagine you learned a lot, but what would be some key learnings as a player you learned from him?
Well, I think space was very important, man, to understand about space in music, and understand about, its place and understand what means more than anything. And what means more than anything is how you relate to the melody of the song. You know what I mean? I totally was there. But the whole time I kept on saying, because when we were doing Tutu, and I just remember, all the time seeing Miles, he's playing, but he's, just playing grooves and playing this, he's not defining some things like he used to be able to define it. And when I said to Marcus, so where are we at with this and everything like that? Where's the next step with it? And he goes, well, we got to take these songs and get Miles to play great melodies again. And I was like, that's a great point, man. And so my whole mantra has always been throughout my whole career is that I do not want to work on music that does not have great melodies, because that's where it all starts to me, And that's why I love Brazilian music, because the melodic content of the Brazilian music is so amazing. And over here in the United States, we've just lost all touch with what melody is, Then again, we've lost touch with a lot of stuff, so it doesn't surprise me that we've lost touch with, the basic melodic content that made songs iconic. Because that's what makes a song iconic. The arrangement, that's great, but if there's no great melody in the arrangement, who cares how great the arrangement is? That's me. So if you listen to any one of my albums that I've made over the last, 25 years or 20-something years, even more than that, 30 years, all the songs have got melodic content to it. And that's very important to me, because that's the great American songbook in its own way. And that's, can you imagine the Beatles just playing with no melodies to those songs? I mean, what is that about, And that's what jazz is these days a lot to me. There's a lot of stuff going on without a center point to the melody, which is why you're not getting iconic songs being written like the great iconic songwriters wrote them. Even guys like Billy Joel, and that they understood the value of it. They were from my generation, but the new generation doesn't seem to have a grip on a lot of that. Some artists do. Some artists do. I'm finding a couple that I really, really like. So I'm hearing some of these young people, that are like, okay, they're starting to get it. But a lot of the bands and a lot of the music out there, man, look at like EDM and everything like that. What is with EDM? I mean, there's so much available, and all it is like just with every DJ using the same sound, everybody like swirling around. It's all about the experience, not about the music.
Yeah, yes, possibly just opening a few cut off filters and taking.
That's some true. Yes, yeah. Sigrid. That's her name, Sigrid. Sigrid. Mirrors. It's really good. And so, it's exciting for me to see. I nurtured an artist myself, Rebecca Angel, and we really did an album. There was a lot of great melodic content on it, and I got all the great musicians on it because we were all home during the freaking pandemic. So I got to really go and make something like that. But to me, till the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
So, jumping tracks slightly here, Jason, are you one of the only people who has fallen asleep in front of Miles Davis while he's been playing?
Yeah, I did. But let me tell you, you work hard enough, man. You know, when you're in the studio, you catch a little studio nap once in a while, you know. You never know when it's going to happen. Well, you know, Luther would always say, Luther would joke around because, one day I was going to go. Well, he called me in, but they were doing guitar. So I came to the studio at 1 o'clock to go and take care of my stuff, get everything up for that, all my stuff, because they always were very, very prepared. When so much was going down, you didn't want people to think that you weren't on top of the case all the time. So I go in there, get my stuff ready, and said, "What are you going to do for the next few hours?" I said, "I'm going to go to the movies, man." You know, and he goes, "Oh, it's a great idea." I goes, "You know what? Chances are, Luther, I got to tell you something. Chances I'm going to freaking fall asleep in the movie theater. You know, I'm so freaking tired." And he goes, "Don't you love to take a nap in the movie theater?" I'm going, "Yeah, that's a good nap, man. The problem is you miss half the freaking movie, but you get to sleep good, you know." So we would laugh about it. And then that 1 week that I was, working that, because I just got done working like 4 solid months of like 1 day a week off of heavy shit, Whitney, Lisa Fisher, Crusaders, Miles, all going into each other, all getting your head in a different place, everything, 12 hours a day. I'm not complaining. I'm paid well. The work was deep, man, and the experiences were amazing. And, and you do that. But, your body's your body. So anyway, my wife came in and Miles was going to play. It was on a Friday night. He was going to play solo. And I said, okay, so we're on the couch in the studio, the main studio. We're all sitting there. Miles in there playing. I'm going, yeah, man. So I put my head on my wife's lap and I fell asleep. And so the next thing I know, man, I opened up my eyes and Miles is standing above me. And he says to me, "I sounded that good, huh?" So I said, "Oh, well, I was trying to cover up and everything, but I fell asleep while he was doing his solo."
Well, it's something unusual and iconic, and your relationship with Miles was so wonderful, and I really encourage our
well, if it wasn't, he would have gone and freaking chopped my head off. If it wasn't, he would have chopped my freaking head off. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like,
yeah, absolutely. You're probably one of the few people in the world, Jason, who can get away with it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The whole thing was this. Miles had no idea how I did what I did. He just knew that when I put my hands on that stuff, man, that it was sounded magic to him. And that's what he wanted.
Yep.
And he knew what we did for him. He knew what Marcus did for him. He knew what I did for him, and that we brought him back. He was not gone, but he wasn't the Miles that was, the leader of the scene or had changed music 5 times. Now here he was, man, changing jazz again. And that's how.
Well, you guys are bringing you guys are bringing a modern sound, a hot new sound to his already prodigious skills. Well, exactly. Right? So it was a great match.
Yeah. We caught a lot of shit. People hated it, man.
With your work with Miles, I wanted to ask about you got to see Joey DeFrancesco right at the start of his career. Can you share with us a little bit about some of your interactions with Joey?
Well, I just had 1 day in the studio basically with Joey as I just met him. Young kid, 16 years old, came in and, was burning. I mean, he was burning, but, at that point, he did a tour with Miles and everything, but he, it's crazy that he was too, to me, not as a player, he wasn't too young, but just as a person to be out there on the road at 16, he needed a tutor, all this stuff. Man, it was a strain on people, but Joey didn't disappoint. He got up there and he played, man, He really did. And I had a great admiration for him as a young man also. He was a character and a half, big character. Lived large. He did. There's no doubt about it. And this has been just a great tragic loss, man, for the music world and, of course, his family and everything, Mm-hmm. You got to take care of you because the scene will kill you.
That's it. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Jason. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And indeed was a huge loss this year with Joey passing.
Oh, yeah.
And so just a slightly different area, although still involving Luther, but you obviously did some recording with Whitney Houston and Luther Vandross, and there's a great section of the book where you cover that. Tell us about those sessions. And at the end, I believe a particular soap opera played an important role as far as Luther's routine.
No, yeah, no. Well, I mean, Luther loved soap operas, but he only loved a few of them. He loved All My Children, and back then you had video cassettes, and video cassettes. If he was in the studio, if somebody would be doing the video for him every day at 1 o'clock, you know. But Whitney and him were close because of Sissy. Sissy Houston did a lot of stuff with Luther, on all of his albums and everything like that. And basically, I wish I could say that there's some amazing drama or something like that, to say. But basically, he had told me when we were doing Here and Now that he was going to be producing Whitney, and that he just wanted me to keep the time open and everything like that. And I told him, sure. And I said, well, we're going to discuss this next week and everything like that when you get back, because that was in the summertime. And I said, okay. And I said, we're going to do it in New York. And I said, that's great. Okay, cool. So we were in, Right Track in New York, and he had heard a track that Hubert Eves had, and they really liked it and thought that's the track that he could do for Whitney. So he ended up putting that together. And then he went and played it for her, and she really liked it. And said, "Okay, we're off." So basically, she was there. She's into getting the vibe and the feeling and everything like that. But it wasn't some big drama and everything like that. She was sweet, really nice. Everything was cool. Was pretty laid back. But what happens? I think Luther was more nervous than everybody because he was going to be producing the vocal. And when she went in there to do the vocal, every singer's got a different routine. You don't know, and since you're not in the studio with them, and really don't know what the story is. Luther didn't have to warm up for anybody, man. He just went in there with like bang, and Whitney just took some time to really get her pipes going so she can go and hit those notes on some of the parts towards the end of the song, And it took a second, but when she did it, really was like she ran down the tune just a couple of times, 2-3 takes. And it was all there. I mean, you're not going to leave until they know it's there. Luther knew that it was there at that point, that he could make a really good vocal comp.
Yeah.
And
no, that's great.
There it
is. It wasn't
long
after that, I believe, that you were working on Lisa Fisher's album. And there's some great stories in there. But one that stood out to me as a keyboard player, and all of our listeners are obviously keyboard players, is the fact that you'd pulled your whole rig down and ended up having to set up your rig again to play one note. Tell us about that one.
One note, yes. I was just talking about that. I was talking about that tonight with Kathy and the people that were staying with her. Basically, Nat Adderley Jr. had done this arrangement for Wildflower. It's great. Everything comes out great. And it seems that Luther had been going back and forth about whether he liked the resolution on this note to be a B flat or an A flat. And so we kind of settled on B flat, that it was okay. And let's do it a bunch of times. You know what I mean? I didn't particularly think that, there was any drama there or anything like that, But we packed up all the stuff. I was done with the album. I was done with everything. And I live an hour outside of New York City. And my wife came in to pick me up. And because right after that, then my guys come and start breaking all my keyboards down, so they can bring back up to the house, the studio. And the next thing you know, I go home and I see my answering machine. Because remember, we got no cell phones or anything like that. You know what I mean? No, nothing like that. When we have answering machines, and I pick up the answering machines. There's like 5 messages there. And this message one from Luther: Jason, call me when you get this, aren't you home yet, man? To pick up the phone and come on, call me. So I got him and said, man, we just pulled him and traffic was freaking horrible, man. He goes, look, I got to have the note A flat. I can't do the B flat, man, So what do you want to do? Would you come back into the city and fix it? I said, I will come back in. What am I going to do? We got to make it right, right? That's what he liked about, me, was that, we got to get this done and we'll get it done. It's the end of the world. What I'm doing tomorrow? I'm sleeping all day tomorrow. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so I'll just drive in, and Kathy will drive in with me, and we'll get it done. So I went in there and set up what I needed to set up, and we went there. And it took took longer to set up and everything and get the sound going. We had to match the sound perfectly. Once we did that, I mean, we laid it down. So here it is. Boom, boom. Okay, great. Pack up, go back. And then he said to me, come here, call up Marcia and project coordinator, and you get paid for today. Get paid for this. You had to come back and everything. I appreciate it, man. No problem. So I call up, and the next thing you know, she says, well, what are we going to do about this? So, I don't even care about going in there and doing it. I said, I care about that I drove back and forth. That's the deal. You know what I mean? New York City traffic and all of that shit. That's not what we do. Everything. She goes, okay, well, how about 1,000? I'm going, I'll take $1,000 for that. That's okay. So I did. That was it, But it made him happy. So there you go. You know,
That is excellent.
I mean, that's your job, man. At that point, to make it happy. I had to start realizing it differently when I became a producer. Them happy.
Well, I think a lot of keyboard players would love to charge the rate of $1,000 per note. So that's probably something else that's unique there, Jason. But of course, it was.
Well, that's not going to happen anymore, man. You know, those days are over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But those days are unfortunately over, and it's really terrible, man. Because you know we deserve, and musicians deserve a lot. But you know, I'm reading a lot of stuff these days, and I'm just seeing, you know, what's happening. Do you realize that like 100,000 songs get released a day on Spotify?
Yeah.
Raised a great issue I was going to ask you about, and you mentioned in your book that, you know, as a solo artist releasing music, it's really hard, even back in when you started your solo career, getting support from record companies, given how much has changed and what you're talking about with Spotify and that, you know, 100,000 songs a day. How does anyone try and make a living out of it? What's your perspective with all your experience? It's nearly impossible, isn't it?
I don't think it is impossible. First of all, you know, the funny thing was that Lucian Grange once said that, well, basically we have a bunch of hobbyists out there playing to an empty house, you know, and that's the truth. And the problem is that's the problem, is that there are many, 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 many people that are clouding up the place, that are taking place that have no business. I'm sorry. If you love music, I'm thrilled for you, man. You want to record music? You want to do it? You want to make stuff happen? You want to buy instruments? That's great. Don't put yourself on our level, man, just because you got a little laptop and you think that you're that, because you're not. You don't know what to do. And unless, you know, you're somebody that's ultra talented like Phineas, who was Billie Eilish's brother, you know, and people that really have got something to say, those are the people you want to go and see what's happening. But the 98% of the other people, we have no use for as this. You have use, and if it brings you enjoyment, I'm very happy for you, because that's what music should be. Music should bring you enjoyment, whether you're going to play it and whether you're going to be a tinkerer in the studio with Ableton Live, you know what I mean, or throwing clips together or presets or everything like that. That's fine. But for you to think that all of a sudden you deserve to be elevated to a place where you think the rest of the world should be listening to your music, you haven't put any time in, paid any dues, gotten anything together. And believe me, when I was young, I was like, you know, young. I'm still young, but different kind of young. But the reality is that, you know, when I was in my 20s, you know, you still, and my thing was different because we had icons to look to, you know, Joe Zawinul, George Duke, Hirsch, and artists. The younger people, they don't want that anymore. They don't want it. They don't want to look at the icons and see, because they weren't there from the beginning to see how really hard it was to navigate these instruments and to turn it into music and to make something happen. And so, you know, you kind of see it now. And the reality is that, you know, it's just too much. This is me. And like I said, I've got nothing against somebody going and buy your stuff, man, do that and everything. But don't walk up to me at a club and tell me that you and I are the same because my music is on Apple Music and so is yours. That's happened to me before, okay? And I'm saying to myself, so how long you been at this, man? Oh, a few years. I'm going, yeah, I've been at it. This is a number of years ago. Yeah, I've been at it 40 years now. How about you? Well, not like that, but I mean, then you got to get back and get to work, man, you know, if I'm going to pay attention. And that's what it is. You know, we do get a little perturbed on the whole thing, but, you know, I know there's good people out there, and I know there's really good musicians out there. They've got to be mentored differently. Like I told you about the melody thing. They've got the capability to go, but they got to be patient and create great melodies, because that's what people want. People want it throughout the history of time. That's what has gotten people to listen to music, great melodies. You know, whether it was a stupid melody like the Macarena or some shit like that, or whether it was something complex like, you know, Sketches of Spain or something like that. They stay with you, man. You know, the Beatles songs. How many Beatles songs can I sing by heart? You know? Mm-hmm. And I mean, or Steely Dan or any of those other places, man, where they took you along this journey because the song took you along for a journey. So I would say to all the keyboard players and everything at them, man, is that, yeah, we know what you can do these days, but show us how you can make it work with a composition that we're going to want to listen to multiple times, and not just put an album on once and throw it away and go, well, that's enough for that one, you know? And I've said that more times than I care to say over the last number of years.
So there we have the end of part one, Paul. As I think you'll agree, there's a lot to look forward to with part two on top of all the brilliant insights Jason had there.
Yeah, I mean, Luther Vandross, Miles Davis, names don't get a lot bigger than that when it comes to iconic recording artists. And the intimate way he shaped their sound is, when you stand back and think about it, it's quite amazing. So really interesting to hear his insights on working with those two icons.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, again, thanks to Jason for taking the time, and we'll see you back in about a week's time for part two.
Da, da, da.